And with that, I'll introduce Mr. Robert Poteat.
Thank you, Stephen. It's good to be back and see so many familiar faces. I wish there were more unfamiliar, however. The facts and mythology of inflation. I've tried to explain the monetary system and then recommend government-issued debt-free money, only to have the inflation bugbear raised in an apparent attempt to discredit what I've been saying. Well, last year, the same question was raised in reference to the American Monetary Act. I take this to be the success of our financially owned propaganda media and the failure of our education system. If we accept the quantity theory of money as causing inflation, we would have to raise the question, why is a government dollar inflationary more than a bank dollar? I'm going to show some empirical evidence to the contrary. It is the bank dollar that is inherently, unavoidably inflationary without recession, depression, or collapse. So I want to start here to tear down these myths about, the fearful myths about inflation. Those of you who have read Joseph Campbell or James Fraser, and if you haven't, these are renowned scholars of mythology, know that every human society, virtually everyone, is integrated around some mythical construct. It's the conjured reality of the time and place. The beliefs in the myths do not make the myths real or true, but beliefs in the myths motivate human action that gives a fair impression of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Our economic myths are just more of the same. They are imaginary human concepts mistaken for reality and acted upon to create a semblance of reality. Examined objectively, they can't be sustained. What better example of imaginary nonsense than the corporation? By legal make-believe, we imbue this imaginary construct with the rights of humans. Corporations cannot act, they have no mass, they have no energy and no sentience. Yet, in the make-believe theater called court, they're afforded the rights and privileges of individuals. It is human individuals and groups of individuals that provide the energy, activity, and sentience attributed to corporations. Individuals and groups of individuals that are shielded from the responsibility for the so-called corporate behavior identified in the book and movie called The Corporation as psychopathic. I worked in one of them, so I learned a little bit about that culture. Banks or corporations, they have stockholders. Those stockholders have had their hands in our pockets long enough. Our monetary system is legalized theft, supported by legal make-believe and tradition. It is time to change. It is past time to change. Now, if you came to this conference fearing inflation, you may be a monetary reformer. What is inflation? Increasing prices seems to be the commonly accepted ideation. But prices can increase for a lot of reasons. They may have nothing to do with inflation as defined in economics text. What makes up prices? Prices are the result of a complex of influences, cost of everything, including the cost of money, taxes, transportation, competition, whimsy, weather, war, greed, and fads. There are a number of psychological factors at work. When people are flush with money, they shop less critically and they pay more. Prestigious reference books and economics texts all have some variation of what you see here. The American Heritage Dictionary. A persistent increase in the level of consumer prices or a persistent decline in the purchasing power of money caused by an increase in the available currency and credit beyond the proportion of available goods and services. This is just a restatement of the quantity theory of money causing inflation. However, as applied to the United States since World War II, it is a patently false reason for decreases in purchasing power of money or increase in prices. In Webster's Encyclopedic Unabridged Dictionary, undue expansion or increase in the currency of a country, especially by issuing paper money and not redeemable in specie. What in the world has redeemability got to do with anything? Our money has never been redeemable in specie, gold standard baloney notwithstanding. The second definition is substantial rise of prices caused by undue expansion of paper money or bank credit. This can be true under certain circumstances, such as the German policy of hyperinflation of 1923, but we'll visit that again later. Futurecast Com is really fun. Inflation is not a thing, but a process is a thing, and price increases are deflationary. Doublethink, the ability to hold two contradictory ideas in the mind at once without cognitive dissonance. Inflation is deflation, war is peace. And there are arguments that prices drive the money supply, the opposite of money supply driving prices. In the credit, debt, money system, it is more rational that prices drive the money supply than the opposite. To meet the prices, you have to borrow the money. That increases the money supply. Both are oversimplifications. What inflation is in this society is a bugbear. She's going to eat you up. She's already licking a fresh rib. This is the mantra of the Fed. Inflation is to be feared. Fear inflation. The standard definitions reinforce this canard. It has been repeated until it has the power of revealed truth. Sophism, a specious argument displaying ingenuity in reasoning or for deceit. Too much money, chasing too few goods. Canard, a false or fabricated story. Too much money, chasing too few goods. Have we had or do we have price inflation? Well, here are food prices from Centralia, Washington in June of 1946, as published in a newspaper ad in the Chronicle newspaper. Coffee, 39 cents a pound. 1 pound can of salmon, 25 cents. You know what prices are today. Since 1946, there have been consistent claims of increases in productivity which should have lowered the prices. So, given the increase in productivity, inflation, as measured by price, is misleading. A rationale for the initiation of the Federal Reserve System was to create an elastic currency. Does this not seem as strange to you to measure with an elastic price measure as if a carpenter built a house with a rubber tape measure? Algebra says that for any system of n variables, you must have n solutions. In plainer language, for any system of components and subsystems, in an interrelated and interactive system, they must all be stable or the whole system is unstable. This applies to everything including our social, financial, political, and economic venues. It is perhaps easier to understand with machines. The space shuttle drops a piece of insulation on launch, damages a heat shield, disintegrates on re-entry. A trivial variable in the complexity of this Rube Goldberg device completely destroyed it. The same principle applies to economic theories. Any theory that does not include the credit-debit money system and all of its effects is a flawed system. This includes almost everyone you've heard. The village idiot version of inflation is too much money chasing too few goods is unacceptably simple-minded. To understand the reason for price increases, we must account for all the variable influences on prices. Anything less is a fallacy. I took this next series of pictures on a Tuesday around noon in late June of 2007. Lewis County Mall, the only steer store in the area, had a sign on it, "Take it home today, look at the parking lot." David's, a large furniture and appliance store, signs all over town for this big sell-off. Again, notice the absence of customers. Right across the street, a blowout sale. Empty parking lot. Is this too much money chasing too few goods? Holman Ford Toyota, literally with acres of pickups, SUVs, cars, and RVs. One of the biggest advertisers in the area. Is this too much money chasing too few goods? This store and this store are big reasons why the other parking lots were empty, but they're not full either. You know what's in those stores, piles and piles of merchandise. Is this too much money chasing too few goods? The size of these stores supports my thesis that the true state of affairs is too many goods chasing too little money. Despite the glut of goods, prices keep going up. We are inundated with advertising, buy, buy, buy. No money, no problem, buy on credit. MasterCard is for everything you can buy. My one credit card keeps raising my limit. I get solicitations in the mail at least weekly for all kinds of credit cards, pre-approved, just sign here. It has been this way since World War II. I remember radio and newspaper advertising as soon as consumer production got fired up after the war. $1 down, $1 a week for your new refrigerator, washing machine, furniture, or whatever. Now look at this. Consumer debt is over $2.4 trillion, probably 2.5 by now. Dollars worth of goods taken home, but not yet paid for. Is this too much money chasing too few goods? Inflation caused by an increase in available currency and credit beyond the proportion of available goods and services can happen. I accept that. But I categorically reject it as the cause of inflation now. But I'm going to show you some historical examples of how it can happen. One is the plundering of the Americas of gold and silver during the 16th and 17th centuries. It has been estimated to have caused up to 400% price increases in Europe. What this shows is that money circulating out of proportion to goods and services can cause price increases no matter the composition of the money. This is a shot through the heart of the gold superstition as a market regulator. However, we must be careful not to accept oversimplifications. Remember the axiom. What were the moneylenders doing during this time Were they extending credit? Does that bugbear go poo in the woods? Further, that period has been characterized as a mini renaissance. Trade, manufacturing, technology were all stimulated. It spilled over into the arts, and it was good times. Have you ever heard anyone complain about selling the house they bought 10 years ago for twice the price they paid? No, they brag. Inflation, to some extent, is stimulating. Some alternative money reformers recommend mild inflation to make sure that businesses can recover their costs. The second example is the German hyperinflation of 1923. Two big mistakes of perception by many are that A, this is proof governments cannot be trusted to issue money, and inflation is caused by immutable economic forces instead of what really happened. What really happened is the hyperinflation was a policy of the privatized German central bank amid some wild speculation. Does that remind you of anything that's happening now? If the German government can be blamed, it must be blamed for not intervening, but it may not have been possible under the Treaty of Versailles. The German government had been forced to privatize its central bank, and agents of government could have been in collusion also. 3, of course, war, war, war. Money is borrowed into circulation and spent making stuff to blow up. 4, the British counterfeiting of Continentals during the Revolutionary War. These examples do not contradict my thesis that no such conditions have existed in the United States since World War II. There has been no surplus of money over available goods, even with war. I reassert that the condition is the opposite: too many goods chasing too little money. Thorstein Veblen, an economist of the early 20th century, characterized captains of industry as saboteurs to maintain prices. If we actually turned our full production capability loose, we would be inundated with goods. Another case can be made that price increases can be caused by shortage of goods. It has nothing to do with increase in the money supply. Shortage is caused by drought, famine, or war, anything that changes the ratio of money to goods. We have had price inflation, indubitably. Why? My hypothesis is that the debt, credit, money system is inherently and unavoidably inflationary. Without recession, depression, or collapse. Here's a graph of the asset value of the United States as published in the Statistical Abstract. In 1981, the assets of the United States were estimated to be $17 trillion. By June 7th of this year, as published in the Federal Reserve Bulletin, $129 trillion. What do we have for assets that accounts for the increase? Nothing. We do not have any more land, and it's well known that our topsoil is depleted, and we are running a food deficit. I read recently that 2007 has been predicted to be the largest grain deficit in the United States in decades. We have extracted oil, gas, and minerals so that we have less. We have cut timber. Aquifers are depleting. Fisheries have been depleted. The environment has been polluted. We do have an increase in building and infrastructure, but we also know there's a huge deficit there in maintenance. We have less quantifiable assets by anything other than monetary price. We are poor on a per capita basis, poorer yet. The chart showing such vast increases in asset prices is the ultimate indicator of inflation if we accept price increase or devaluation of currency as the definition. How can it be otherwise when our assets have been reduced? Yet we have astronomical increases in prices of those decreased assets. Our thinking processes have been so corrupted by valuing everything in monetary price, we cannot even think straight. Look again at the total assets. Note once again, 17 trillion in 1981. Now let's look at credit market debt. Credit market debt is a summary of all the debt sectors. Notice that by 1995, credit market debt was passing the asset value of the United States in 1981. If the asset prices had not been inflated, by 1996, the whole thing would have collapsed. Ipso facto, price inflation is a necessary condition to keep the system going. Inflating prices of our depleted and degraded assets is necessary to sustain the credit debt money system. When the Fed says that it is fighting inflation, it is if you understand the language of their mythology. What they're fighting is to inflate but limit it. Given the nature of the system, one could argue they're doing a fairly good job. If they try to hold it in check too much, you get recession. Alan Greenspan, former chairman of the board of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors, engineered 2 recessions, announcing ahead of time that he was going to do it. He said he would bring the economy to a soft landing. Do we need to review doublethink and sophistry here again? The rest of the time, the Fed is fighting to inflate when they lower interest rates. We must keep in mind that banks rely on borrowers to borrow. We often say that banks issue money, and they do, but mostly when people borrow. If people stop borrowing, the system collapses. The Fed and the commercial lenders must keep the debt slaves coming to the loan window. Lately, there's been a lot of blah, blah, blah about injecting liquidity. This just means running up the debt. I anticipate a question, I thought of it too, that since our money is debt, or credit if you prefer, isn't the increase in debt a contradiction of my statement that it's not the cause of inflation? However plausible that may seem, that too is a misleading simplification. Look at the breakout of a single loan. Principal, interest, debt, and money. It's easy to see on the basis of one loan that this loan is not repayable. There is not enough money put into circulation. There was no money created to pay the interest. Add a loan, one of the borrowers can pay it back now, but not both. Pay one back. Now, $1,100 of debt, only $900 of money. Not only can the interest not be paid, neither can all the principal. So more lending is required. And when you lend more, you add an increment of interest to the debt, and this is the source of the exponential growth of debt in the system. It's the way it works. Here's a summary of 1 to n, where n in the real world is a very large number. And this is mathematical notation for summation. The epsilon 1 to n just indicates the sum of all those loans. When you add up all those parts, it's the same as if a single loan had been made. It is not repayable. But the number of loans outstanding and the seeming availability of money obscures the fact that it cannot be repaid without introducing more debt. And there you go again. You add more interest, more debt, and it grows exponentially. And this is the source of all these charts that you see going up, up, up. It seemed ultimately clear to me, but I set out to show it with a simple experiment. I set up a dummy poker game with 4 hands and dealt showdown poker with only borrowed money in the game. Each player starting with $100 at 10% interest. The first thing you see is $400 of money in the game and $440 of debt at the bank. Each player borrowed as necessary to stay in the game, and guess what? The debt accumulated at exactly a 10% exponential rate. I continued dealing until $20,000 of debt had accumulated. At that point, the north hand had paid off his debt, won a considerable sum. The other 3 hands had all the debt. And this is similar to the real world. The simple experiment is not scientific proof. For one thing, banks spend interest money back in the economy. A true model of the economy must include that and many more things. Remember the axiom from algebra. But I do contend that the experiment shows that the extension of credit that results in more debt than money is the fundamental driver of exponential growth of debt and concomitant price inflation. Necessary price inflation to keep the system going. At the 2005 conference, Jack Bedell addressed using interest rates to control inflation. This is another canard that has been raised to the level of revealed truth that raising interest rates reduces inflation. Raising interest rates increases the cost of doing business to everyone who uses credit, which is virtually everyone. Increasing costs cannot sensibly reduce prices. However, it does cause deflation. It will slow business down, causing layoffs. Some prices will fall in bankruptcies. It does have an effect by squeezing business, labor, and government. During recession, governments lose tax revenues, people laid off demand more social services, everybody gets hurt. Deflation is far more hurtful than nominal inflation. I received an email from an individual who uses this signature. If you must hurt someone to solve a problem, you are the problem. This private credit debt money system is a problem. It is hurtful. Here's another hurt. It's a little off the subject of inflation, but I want to show it before I go. This is a study of global wealth distribution. This is from Wider Edu. You can look this up on the internet and look at it yourself. On the basis of official exchange rate, the lowest quintile, that is the lowest 20% of the population, owns 0.1% of the wealth. That's 20% owns 1,000th of the wealth. The highest quintile, the highest 20%, owns 93.9%. The top 1% of the population owns 39.9%. Now, on the basis of participating price parity, it looks a little bit better, but it is still grossly maldistributed. Would someone like to tell me this is not a prescription for chaos? I cannot sanction terrorism, but I can predict it under these circumstances. This debt culture is worldwide. We cannot expect other than more of the same until we change. To do the same thing and expect a different outcome is insanity. Distribution of wealth is a problem. It's a source of social chaos, disrupting families and social harmony. Environmental degradation is a problem. War is a problem. There is little, if any, hope of realizing the American ideology of peace, freedom, and sufficiency without monetary reform. But it's more than a problem, it is our opportunity. We have the history, the technical knowledge to fix it. We must take action. We must get smarter. We cannot accept econobabble doublespeak that is so easily refuted as too much money chasing too few goods. Go visit a Walmart. Just visit, don't buy anything. Then come back and tell me we have too much money chasing too few goods. We are living with inflation. So how can fear of inflation stop us from doing the right thing? Personally, I have confidence that the money system can be reformed as prescribed in the American Monetary Act. In this equation, if money represents the money supply and widgets represents goods, you divide the two, you get a price per widget. If you double them, you get the widgets for the money, you get the same price. When you issue money for goods and services, it is not inflationary. I do not fear that requiring banks to borrow government money to come up to 100% reserves is inflationary. However, if I'm wrong, I'd be willing to accept temporary inflation to achieve the desired reform. How much can it hurt given what we're living with? We've been living with it all along. What's to fear if we have a little more? And remember this, if you fear inflation, you may be a monetary reformer, and here's a good reason to do it. Thank you.